Hi, Rebecca. How's your mum?
Well, that's the question that none of us ever know. If you have a relative or are yourself going through cancer, you'll know that you're only as good as your last scan. But as far as we know, the miracle drug that she's on is holding everything at bay. So for the moment, she's okay. Thank you.
And how's she feeling in herself?
Oh, well, I think this is the last thing she wants to talk about. I mean, as she sits looking at her garden, which has been a labor of love for her whole life, watching all the birds, she's very interested by her blue tit nest. She cannot help but think this is the last time that she's going to see spring. And what lies ahead is daunting, is horrific. Mum is brave, she is outspoken, she is unstoppable, except she has a fear of pain, and who doesn't? So the thought of having a bad death, and a bad death is described in this report as one without agency that you have had no choice over, the thought of having a bad death weighs heavy on her mind.
When she first brought up with the family that she was considering heading to Dignitas when the moment came, how did she bring it up with you, and how did you react?
So did she bring it up with us? We have spoken all our lives about how we want independence as individuals and the choice to do certain things. So I've always known that she would want to do what suits her life in her death. But the way that we found out about Dignitas was pretty much similar to how everybody else did. There was a Times article that she wrote where she said she joined it, and that was the first time I found out that she had membership. I knew she'd been talking about it, but yeah, it was a wee bit of a shock.
I'm sure, and she has gone on since to talk very openly about the situation she finds herself in, and talking about the laws in this country, which she says are a complete mess. How do you feel about it?
Oh, she's absolutely right. I mean, I think she's quoting Lord Falconer there in the report, saying it's a complete mess. And other professionals in the system who have looked over the jurisdiction are quoted in the report as saying we are failing people at a time when they really need us. There are 250 million people that have access to assisted dying in all the countries that have brought in this legislation, that have changed their jurisdiction to allow it. The palliative care has improved, and the uptake has not gone massively out of control. There are protections, there are controls. It is working, and we, as this brilliant country that is usually forward-thinking, that is usually an early adopter of all the brilliant democratic procedures, are lagging so far behind. I feel like we are trapped in a prehistoric notion of end-of-life care being better than preventing pain. Surely a good death represents a good life. So if you've had dignity in life, why wouldn't you have dignity in death? And we all seem to have forgotten the incredible audio tapes by Dame Diana Rigg, where this unbelievable woman of immense power and strength has been brought to her knees by pain, by incontinence, by the absolute abysmal nature of her death.
What do you say to those, Rebecca, who suggest it would then be a slippery slope and there would be coercion on occasion, and it opens the doors to all sorts of challenges that we really don't want our loved ones to face?
Now, this seems to be the main argument point for many people, but it hasn't happened in all the other places. We're not going to be the first country to adopt this process. We can look at the amazing raft of legislation that is out there and pick and choose, cherry pick our best way forward so that vulnerable people are protected. My family, we're only talking about terminal illness. We're not talking about mental health at all. We're talking about terminal illness with a 6-month life expectancy, and it's a physical illness. We're not going along the lines of mental health, which I know can be one of the most painful things to experience. But at the moment, we're just asking for physical illness with a life expectancy of 6 months or less for the people that are experiencing that to have the agency to choose death without pain. And the other countries that have brought this in, there hasn't been this terrifying slippery slope of coercive death. And we have to protect the vulnerable. Of course we do. But we're not reinventing the wheel. People have done this around the world and they've done it brilliantly, and we need to follow them.
Rebecca, how hard is it balancing respect for your mum's wishes and your instinct not to let her go?
Well, it's just impossible, isn't it? The other thing that Lord Falconer talked about in the report is the fact that if you encourage or enable in any way your loved one to end their life, and that includes just travelling alongside them to Dignitas, you face prosecution, which he calls a hellish experience. There is testimony from a family that were under investigation for 2 years, and it cost them thousands of pounds to defend themselves from supporting their mother through the end of her life and her choice to have a good death. And they were brought to their knees by it, and one of them attempted suicide. So everything surrounding this is messy. We could make it so much easier. The fact that mum is dying is appalling. I can't bear it. I speak to her half a dozen times a day at least. She is my person. I don't want to think about her dying, but if I do, I want to think about her having her choices and her to have the comfortable, dreamlike death of in her bed, surrounded by her family, and having a fabulous last meal, and then taking a very careful cocktail of drugs that gives her an incredibly painless death. Who wouldn't want that? I don't want to think about it. I want to ground any plane that she thinks that she's getting on and rip the drugs from her hands. But the alternative is appalling. The alternative of a painful death is unthinkable. So it's horrific to have to fight for this at a time when all we should be doing is cherishing the best moments we have, rather than worrying about the worst moments to come.
If your mum wanted you to go to Dignitas with her, would you ever consider doing that and then facing the consequences when you came home? I've thought about this quite a lot. I know your mum a little bit, and I've been reading her story in the Daily Express. I think a lot about the family and the challenges that you're facing very much in the public eye. And I also wondered what I would do if my mum had said to me when she was alive, "Will you come with me and hold my hand?"
I mean, how do you say no to that? How do you say no to that? Obviously, I'm a working mum of 2 very young boys. I don't have time to go to prison. I mean, who does? And that's the last thing that mum would want. She would absolutely be furious if I came with her at a cost to my freedom and my family. I'm also deputy president of Childline. I don't know whether you can do that with a criminal record. And what a ridiculous reason to have a criminal record. So legally, I cannot say I would go with her, but realistically, there's no way she's going alone. I hear Switzerland is very nice. I've never been. Maybe I would have a coincidental alongside trip.
How are you coping, Rebecca?
Oh, well, you're lovely to ask, but please don't ask me that, because I'll burst into tears. I don't know. How does anyone cope with this? It's horrible. Lots of people have it lots worse, and mum is receiving gold star treatment, and is surrounded by people who love her. I just would rather be talking about anything else today.
Yeah. If it's any comfort at all, it's a privilege to grow old, and you will spend every moment with your mum in her final days, and that is also a privilege. It's good to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you.